So many of my students really dislike this novel, and in this video I'm going to try and bring out the deeper meanings and the symbolism so that you'll at least be able to enjoy discussing it, even if you didn't enjoy reading it. So if we just pop down to this review, a page turner and a heartbreaker, a tour de force of knotted tension and buried anguish. It sounds absolutely grand, doesn't it? Let's delve into the ending and see how we might justify that kind of review. Pretty much everything in this novel is symbolic. It's a story in which hardly anything happens, and the stuff that does happen is completely unexciting and uninteresting. So its only value really is in the symbolism. So I'm going to read the ending to you and take you through the symbolism as we go. The Kingsfield doesn't have much in the way of grounds, so automatically we have the use of irony here. King is obviously something of value, and that's ironically contrasted to the lives of the donors. Their lives appear to have no value, but of course, their tissue, their organs, have great value. So there's a double reason for the irony here. They have value as body parts. The square's the obvious congregating point, and the few bits behind the building look more like wasteland. So that obviously is symbolic of the lives that these donors lead. The largest chunk, which the donors call the field, is a rectangle of overgrown reeds. So you can see Ishiguro uses the technique of contrast all the time, and that is again symbolic of the life that these children have been given. And thistled, held in wire mesh fences. So we've got the sense of them being in a kind of prison, which is also emphasized with this idea of them being in a square. And the capitalization of the S suggests that this is the name of the prison. So their whole lives, if you like, are a prison where they're just slaves to their eventual destiny, which is to be used as body parts. There's always been talk of turning it into a proper lawn for the donors, but they haven't done it yet, even now. It might not be so peaceful even if they did get round to it because of the big road nearby. All the same, when donors get restless and need to walk it off, that's where they tend to go, scraping through all the nettles and brambles, and that again is symbolic of the hardships that they have to face in their life. The particular morning I'm talking about, it was really foggy, and I knew the field would be soaking, but Tommy had been insistent we go there for a walk. So we've got pathetic fallacy going on here, and the foggy conditions reflect the lack of reasoning that Kathy has. She doesn't actually understand what Tommy is going through, as he points out later, because he is a donor and she is not yet a donor. And she hasn't come to terms, even though she's cared for countless people who have died, she hasn't really come to terms with what it means to be in that position. Not surprisingly, we were the only ones there, which probably suited Tommy fine. After crashing about the thickets for a few minutes, he stopped next to the fence and stared at the blank fog on the other side. Well, this is obviously a metaphor for death. And the fog that's death is impenetrable, it's blank. It opens up the possibility that there is something better on the other side. Perhaps there is a heaven, but it also opens up the possibility that there is nothing, only emptiness. Death is the end. Kath, I don't want to take this the wrong way, but I've been thinking it over a lot. Kath, I think I ought to get a different carer. In the next few seconds after he said this, I realized I wasn't surprised by it at all, that in some funny way I'd been waiting for it. But I was angry at the same time, that should say, all the same, sorry, and didn't say anything. It's not just because the fourth donation's coming up, he went on. It's not just about that. It's because of stuff like what happened last week when I had all that kidney trouble. There's going to be much more stuff like that coming. That's why I came and found you, I said. That's exactly why I came to help you. For what's starting now, and it's what Ruth wanted too. Now, so this is quite revealing that fact that Kathy has put that reason last suggests that she believes Tommy has more respect for Ruth's desires than for her own. And so, although she claims that Tommy has been the great love of her life and that she has been the great love of Tommy's life, this detail undermines that and suggests that actually Tommy was more in love with Ruth than with Kathy. Interesting, isn't it? So Kathy never tells us that because she doesn't see it that way, but Ishiguro has created an unreliable narrator, and often we find out what's really going on through what other people say and do, things that Kathy herself doesn't realise and won't face. And that, of course, is another example of dramatic irony, where we realise something that Kathy doesn't. Ruth wanted that other thing for us, Tommy said. She wouldn't necessarily have wanted you to be my carer through this last bit. And the fact that Tommy refers to their relationship as that other thing certainly suggests that he doesn't view it as love. It's an unequal power relationship, isn't it? Tommy is dependent on Kathy in many ways, but Kathy doesn't seem so dependent on Tommy. And the fact that he can't name what their relationship is does suggest it's not really based on love. It's based on something else, and he's uncomfortable saying what that is. Tommy, I said, and I suppose by now I was furious, but I kept my voice quiet and under control. I'm the one to help you. Notice how she says that after Tommy has talked about Ruth. So basically, she's not saying that I love you more than Ruth did. She's saying Ruth's dead. I'm just all that you've got left. Again suggesting that their relationship is not as strong as she has portrayed it. That's why I came and found you again. Ruth wanted the other thing for us. And again, by focusing on Ruth, Tommy isn't suggesting that he wanted it. He, if you like, here symbolically appears to be Kathy's victim, and he's actually trying to get himself out of this relationship by forcing Kathy no longer to be his carer. All this is something else, Kath. I don't want to be that way in front of you. He was looking down at the ground, a palm pressed against the wire mesh fence. So his words, I don't want it to be that way in front of you, suggests that he's trying to spare her feelings, but the imagery tells us something else. Look at his palm, it's pressed against the wire mesh fence. He feels trapped, and this is a symbol of how he's trapped in his relationship with Kathy. So she's not actually making him feel better here, she's making him feel much worse. She's trapping him. And for a moment he looked like he was listening intently to the sound of the traffic somewhere beyond the fog. So this again is an image of him looking for some escape. The traffic is moving somewhere else, just as he wants to move somewhere else away from Kathy, but also he wants to move towards death. That's what's symbolically beyond the fog. And that was when he said it, shaking his head slightly. Ruth would have understood. She was a donor, so she would have understood. I'm not saying she'd necessarily have wanted the same thing for herself. If she'd been able to, maybe she'd have wanted you as her carer right to the end. Look at the word maybe. Again, he doesn't really think Kathy is somebody that Ruth would have wanted around, even if she'd been able to. But he can't break it to her and say, actually, you're not really that likable. And that's one of the problems with the book, I think, isn't it? That actually we hear everything from Kathy's point of view. We don't really like her. She's incredibly irritating. But Ishiguro wants us to feel that way. He wants us not to trust her. And it takes a really strong reader to put up with that kind of narrator. But she'd have understood about me wanting to do it differently. Kath, sometimes you just don't see it. You don't see it because you're not a donor. And now, symbolically, we could be looking here at Tommy addressing all of us. So he carries Ishiguro's point of view. And it's worth pausing here to think about the whole idea of being a donor. Many people look at this novel and say, oh, it's a science fiction novel, isn't it? They've created these clones, and these clones are giving their organs away, and Ishiguro is imagining what this kind of science fiction society would be like. But actually, I think that's completely wrong. He's not imagining what that sort of society would be like. There'd be a resistance movement. There'd be people who didn't agree with having donors, who would try and preserve them. The donors would try and escape. They wouldn't just walk around expecting to give their donations until they die. Many of them would try and flee abroad. The whole universe that Ishiguro describes here doesn't make sense as a science fiction novel. So actually he's up to something else. And what he's saying is, actually, I'm writing about the real world. Are we, the normal human beings who believe in free will and believe that we have control of our lives, are we actually different to donors? Because what makes them similar to us is that they have a destiny that they don't fight. They just follow a path society has set out for them. And Ishiguro is asking, well, reader, are you actually any different? Is your free will real? Or do you end up in relationships that don't really work because you're following some kind of instinct instead of logic? Do you end up repeating the mistakes of the past, just like Kathy does? Do you end up being obsessed with nostalgia and looking back? Do you actually have jobs which are interesting or fulfilling, or are they just as pointless as the jobs that Ruth envisages working in an office? No, millions of people work in an office and lead pointless lives, don't they? And actually, Ishiguro is attacking the life choices that his readers make. He's not really writing about clones at all. The clones are a symbol for us. Okay, let's delve back in. It was when he came out with this that I turned and walked off. As I said, I'd been almost prepared for the bit about not wanting me anymore as his carer, but what had really stung, coming after all those other little things, like when he'd kept me standing in the square, was what he'd said then, the way he'd divided me off yet again, not just from all the other donors, but from him and Ruth. So finally she's beginning to realise that Tommy values Ruth more than her. But what does she do with this realization? She suppresses it. This never turned into a huge fight, though. And that's another bit of symbolism that Ishiguro is interested in. Do we actually fight for what we believe in, or do we shy away from that? And this, I think, is actually an English trait, isn't it? English people tend not to complain. They try to be polite. Typically, if someone's having a heart attack in the street, the English person doesn't interfere because they don't want to embarrass the other person or embarrass themselves. And Ishiguro is partly foreign, he's partly Japanese, and I think he's attacking the English personality here. At least that's how it feels to me. When I stalked off, there wasn't much else I could do other than go back up to his room, and then he came up himself several minutes later. I'd cooled down by then, and so had he, and we were able to have a better conversation about it. It was a bit stiff, but we made peace, and even got into some of the practicalities of changing carers. Then, as we were sitting in the dull light, so here this is symbolic of the relationship she's created. And again, she's trapped him. She could have gone anywhere, but no, she's gone to his room, knowing that he will end up there and be trapped by her again. Side by side, on the edge of his bed. And again, on the edge of his bed is symbolic of how he wants to escape again. He doesn't want to sit down with her. He's right on the edge of it, but she won't let him. I don't want us to fight again, Kath, but I've been wanting to ask you this a lot. I mean, don't you get tired of being a carer? All the rest of us, we became donors ages ago. You've been doing it for years. Don't you sometimes wish, Kath, they'd hurry up and send you to your notice? Now, this is a really difficult bit of symbolism here. Is Ishiguro suggesting that Tommy has the right view of life, that basically life is pointless and you're better off out of it as quickly as possible? Or are we supposed to side actually with Kathy, annoying as she is? She clings on to life for as long as possible. Isn't that a better choice than just giving up? I shrugged. I don't mind. Anyway, it's important they're a good carers, and I'm a good carer. But is it really that important? Okay, it's really nice to have a good carer, but in the end, is it really so important? The donors will all donate just the same, and they'll all complete. So this is a nihilistic view of life. It basically says, if life is just going to end in death, then there's no real meaning to life. And once you stop enjoying your health, you might as well die. So this is a utilitarian view. This is the kind of society that puts old people in homes and just waits for them to die. But that is our society, isn't it? That's what happens. Our parents don't live with us till they die. Our grandparents don't live with us till they die. As a society, we've kind of got rid of them and put them in institutions. And those institutions are just the same as these institutions that Tommy and the donors are in. We basically get rid of people when they're not useful anymore, and they give up on life and die. So Ishiguro's using the clones here to say, actually, are we any different from this? Do we fight for life, or do we actually just give up? Or do we give up on those who are too old to fight for themselves? It's a powerful question. Of course it's important. A good carer makes a big difference to what a donor's life's actually like. But all this rushing about you do, all this getting exhausted and being by yourself, I've been watching you. It's wearing you out. You must do, Kath. You must sometimes wish they'd tell you you can stop. I don't know why you don't have a word with them, ask them why it's been so long. And then, when I kept quiet, he said, I'm just saying, that's all. Let's not fight again. So this is a moment when Tommy reveals himself as being completely opposite to Kath. She's lost him here before he's died. He has turned away from life already, and he's suggesting that she should abandon it as well. I put my head on his shoulder and said, yeah, well, maybe. It won't be for much longer anyway, but for now, I have to keep going. Even if you don't want me around, there are others who do. I suppose you're right, Kath. You are a really good carer. You'd be the perfect one for me too, if you weren't you. So there's irony there. You'd be a perfect carer if she takes this to mean if I weren't in love with you and therefore being upset at watching you watching me die. But he's also saying you'd be the perfect carer if you were actually a donor and you understood what I was going through. But actually, we don't have anything in common anymore because you're not going through it. And that's revealed again with the symbolism here. He did a laugh. Not that he laughed, but by doing a laugh, he's pretending that something is funny. And put his arm around me, though we kept sitting side by side. So this description again shows how there's no real affection here. They're still divided. Then he said, I keep thinking about this river somewhere, with the water moving really fast, and these two people in the water trying to hold on to each other, holding on as hard as they can, but in the end it's just too much. So the river here, I think, is symbolic of death. It's like the river Styx in Greek mythology that divided the living from the dead in hell. And to go through that river was to forget the living. And this is important symbolism in the ending that Tommy keeps coming back to. He wants to forget, but also he realizes that death is going to overcome them both. The current's too strong. Again, that's symbolic of death. They've got to let go, drift apart. And of course, this is a reference to the title. Everything's coming full circle here. Never let me go, but Tommy is letting her go. In a sense, she dies when Tommy dies. He's her last hope. That's how I think it is with us. It's a shame, Kath, because we've loved each other all our lives, but in the end, we can't stay together forever. When he said this, I remember the way I'd held on to him that night in the windswept field on the way back from Littlehampton. I don't know if he was thinking about that too, or if he was still thinking about his rivers and strong currents. In any case, we went on sitting like that on the side of the bed for a long time, lost in our thoughts. Then, in the end, I said to him, I'm sorry I blew up at you earlier. I'll talk to them. I'll try and see to it you get someone really good. Let's just nip back here. And again, we've got dramatic irony going on here. This is after they found out from Miss Emily and Madame that there was no deferral. But the place they lived, and they find out this life-changing secret, that actually there is no deferral, is just called Littlehampton, as though it was of no significance. It's a shame, Kath, he said again, and I don't think we talked any more about it that morning. You notice how often he repeats the word shame here, and it does suggest that Kath should be ashamed of her treatment of Tommy. He's accusing her of manipulating him without actually saying so, and Kath doesn't pick up on it. I remember the few weeks that came after that, the last few weeks before the new carer took over, as being surprisingly tranquil. So there's no passion in this relationship, even though they both know Tommy's going to die soon. There isn't a sense of them taking every pleasure in life while they can. They're just waiting for the end to come. Maybe Tommy and I were making a special effort to be nice to each other, but the time seemed to slip by in an almost carefree way. You might think that there would have been an air of unreality about us being like that, but it didn't seem strange at the time. I was quite busy with a couple of my other donors in North Wales, and that kept me from the Kingsfield more than I'd have wanted, but I still managed to come in 3 or 4 times a week. The weather grew colder, but stayed dry and often sunny, and we whiled away the hours in his room, sometimes having sex, more often just talking, or with Tommy listening to me read. So you can see how passive he's become in this relationship. She's the dominant one, Tommy listening to me read. Once or twice, Tommy even brought out his notebook and doodled away for new animal ideas while I read from the bed. And we've got a division here. So we've got her attempt to make sense of life through stories, and that's what reading does. And Ishiguro, I think, must be on her side here. After all, he is a writer. So he must admire this instinct in her, whereas Tommy, we admire less in this imagery because he becomes interested in what's animal. He just reacts on instinct. So we might say, by giving up on life, he's just reacting in an emotional way, whereas Kathy may be superior to him. She's still looking for another way of living, something that you can do through books. So Ishiguro could be saying here that books themselves are something that will never let you go. It's something you possess forever, just like the memories of Hailsham, which Kathy is going to be so desperate to keep. Then I came in one day, and it was the last time. I arrived just after 1 o'clock on a crisp December afternoon. I went up to his room, half expecting some change. I don't know what. Maybe I thought he would have put up decorations in his room or something. So Ishiguro has deliberately chosen their parting to happen at Christmas time, and Tommy doesn't engage with Christmas. Well, symbolically, that might suggest that this world they inhabit has treated them so badly that there's nothing left to celebrate. But it also might suggest that these kinds of rituals like Christmas are things that do save us, that do change us from being people who just accept our fates to people who enjoy life. And maybe here we're supposed more to come round to Kathy's way of living. She fights against death at all costs, and she's even willing to lose Tommy in order to preserve life, in order to keep enjoying what little life she has left. But of course, everything was as normal, and all in all, that was a relief. Tommy didn't look any different either, but when we started talking, it was hard to pretend this was just another visit. Then again, we'd talked over so much in the previous weeks, it wasn't as though we had anything in particular we had to get through. And I think we were reluctant to start any new conversation we'd regret not being able to finish properly. And that's why there was a kind of emptiness to our talk that day. Just once, though, after I'd been wandering aimlessly around his room for a while, I'd ask him, "Tommy, are you glad Ruth completed before finding out everything we did in the end?" And so what's really interesting here is that in his final conversation with her, she chooses to bring up Ruth. That reveals her jealousy, but it also reveals her knowledge that Tommy actually valued Ruth more than Kathy. He was lying on the bed and went on staring at the ceiling for a while before saying, "Funny, because I was thinking about the same thing the other day. What you've got to remember about Ruth, when it came to things like that, she was always different to us. You and me, right from the start, even when we were little, we were always trying to find things out. Remember, Kath, all those secret talks we used to have? But Ruth wasn't like that. She always wanted to believe in things. That was Ruth. So, yeah, I think it's best the way it happened." So this is an interesting view, isn't it? This idea that Ruth was better off believing in things. And that's a reference, I think, to faith. She believed that she could save Kathy and Tommy through the deferral. And that's what a religious belief does. It says, well, this might be the only life we've got, but there's something better waiting for us. And that's the kind of future that Tommy and Kathy had imagined when they got the deferral. We're not going to die so quickly. There's going to be something else on the other side. But Kath and Tommy both reject that. They both stop believing in things, or at least according to Tommy. Kath, of course, believes in the power of reading, the power of books. She is, after all, writing a book, isn't she? And again, this is Ishiguro saying, look, in life, if life has got no meaning, then how do we put meaning together? And one of the main ways we do that is through creating stories. And that's a large part of what Never Let Me Go is about. All these characters are constantly inventing stories. That was Ruth, so yeah, in a way, I think it's best the way it happened. And then he added, of course, what we found out, Miss Emily, all of that, doesn't change anything about Ruth. She wanted the best for us at the end. She really wanted the best for us. I didn't want to get into a big discussion about Ruth at that stage, so I just agreed with him. But now I've had more time to think about it, I'm not so sure how I feel. Part of me keeps wishing we'd somehow been able to share everything we discovered with Ruth. Okay, maybe it would have made her feel bad, made her see whatever damage she'd once done to us couldn't be repaired as easily as she'd hoped. And maybe, if I'm honest, that's a small part of my wishing she knew it all before she completed. But in the end, I think it's about something else, something much more than my feeling vengeful and mean-spirited. Because as Tommy said, she wanted the best for us at the end, and though she'd said that day what she'd said that day in the car, I'd never forgive her, she was wrong about that. I've got no anger left for her now. When I say I wish she'd found out the whole score, it's more because I feel sad at the idea of her finishing up different from me and Tommy. The way it is, it's like there's a line with us on one side and Ruth on the other, and when all's said and done, I feel sad about that, and I feel she would too if she could see it. So this again is ironic. This line that divides Ruth from her and Tommy, I think, is in Kathy's head, because Tommy's drawn the line the other way. In many ways, he's said that he's like Ruth. They're the ones who are donors, and Kathy's the one on the other side. Or you could look at it the other way, and that Tommy is saying, no, Ruth believed in things where she and Tommy don't. Kathy and Tommy don't believe in things. Certainly, Kathy views this as Tommy suggesting that he's got a lot more in common with Kathy. Tommy and we didn't do any big farewell number that day. When it was time, he came down the stairs with me, which he usually didn't do, and we walked across the square together to the car. Because of the time of year, the sun was already setting behind the buildings, so this obviously is symbolic of death, Tommy's time running out. There were a few shadowy figures, as usual, under the overhanging roof, and so this again is symbolic of not just his death, but everyone else's. All the other donors are going to die. But the square itself was empty. Tommy was silent all the way to the car. Then he did a little laugh. Again, we've got the repetition of this, and it shows how little affection he has for Kathy. It's all pretense. You know, Kath, when I used to play football back at Hailsham, I had this secret thing I did. When I scored a goal, I'd turn around like this. He raised both arms up in triumph, and I'd run back to my mates. I never went mad or anything, just run back with my arms up like this. He paused for a moment, his arms still in the air. Then he lowered them and smiled. In my head, Kath, when I was running back, I always imagined I was splashing through water, nothing deep, just up to the ankles at the most. And that's what I used to imagine every time. Splash, splash, splash. So there's something incredibly childish about this description, isn't it? And we could infer from that Tommy is being childish and accepting his death. But it also could refer to his innocence. And again, the river is symbolic of death. So all his life, this moment of joy in his football, is about escaping death. And perhaps he's suggesting that we ought to really enjoy these small pleasures. Now, ironically, the small pleasure of having Kathy around isn't even as great as this, and that's why he only did a little laugh. He's pretending. And that could be why he's telling her this story, to show her how there aren't really any strong feelings between them at all. It's a very cruel way to say goodbye in a way, isn't it? He's trying to suggest to Kathy that he doesn't love her in any way. He put his arms up again. It felt really good. You've just scored, you turn, and then splash, splash, splash. He looked at me and did another little laugh. And so the repetition again suggests to us that there isn't any real feeling for her. All this time, I never told a single soul. I laughed too and said, "You crazy kid, Tommy." After that, we kissed, just a small kiss, and the dashes here, the parenthesis, emphasize how little affection there is in that kiss. But she doesn't admit it. She still thinks of it as we kissed, as though it's romantic, but her very description of it undermines that and shows how little love there is. Then I got into the car. Tommy kept standing there while I turned the thing around. Then, as I pulled away, he smiled and waved. I watched him in my rear view, and he was standing there almost till the last moment. Right at the end, I saw him raise his hand again vaguely and turn away towards the overhanging roof. Then the square had gone from the mirror. And again, so here she's not just leaving Tommy, she's escaping that prison. She's going towards freedom. However, she's looking in the mirror, and that's also a reflection, isn't it, of her future. That's what she's also driving towards, as well as leaving it. And of course, there's real symbolism here in these being her last moments with Tommy. They don't declare their love for each other. They don't say goodbye. And her last image is not of him. It's just of this prison again. And perhaps it's suggesting that life itself is a prison. We don't have free will. Like Kathy in her car, we're just driving towards a certain death. And Ishiguro asks us to say, well, what are we making of that journey? Are we trying to do anything special with this life, or are we just leading the same lives as everybody else? Are our lives completely pointless in this way, just like the clones' lives are? I was talking to one of my donors a few days ago who was complaining about how memories, even our most precious ones, fade surprisingly quickly, but I don't go along with that. the memories I value most, I don't see them ever fading. So this is a difference between Ruth and Kathy and her ability to hold on to life, and the donors who give up on life. And it's all connected to this idea of memory. And I think memories here are symbolic of books. And the reason that I think that is that she likens them to stories, as we'll see in a minute. And Ishiguro is talking about the power of books here as life enhancing, just like our memories are. And if you have this rich inner life, then life is much harder to give up on. And it's people who don't really think about their lives, who just go from moment to moment, those people find it much harder to hang on to life because it has no meaning. It's just a series of experiences ending in death. But it's only once you start to tell stories about your life through memory that your life starts to take on a meaning and a purpose. I lost Ruth, then I lost Tommy, but I won't lose my memories of them. I suppose I lost Hailsham too. You still hear stories about some ex-Hailsham student trying to find it. And again, see how memory is connected to story. Or rather the place where it used to be. And the odd rumour will go around sometimes about Hailsham, about what Hailsham's become these days. A hotel, a school, a ruin. And so let's pause here and think about the symbolism of Hailsham. Hail is obviously very painful weather condition. It's quite dangerous. And sham suggests that it's completely fake. So hail suggests that once the power of this school and the power it's had, the hold it's had on the imagination of the children who've been through it, but it's also damaging. They're damaged by it, and it is a sham. It's not real. In this school, they think they have free will, but actually they're controlled, aren't they, by these stories of what will happen to them in the woods. They seem to be controlled to such an extent that they never try to escape, not just while they're at school, but once they've left, they just give in to their fates. And if we think beyond this a little further, looking at it like this, a hotel, a school, a ruin, in the middle of that, perhaps Ishiguro is asking, is every school like this? Does every school act as a kind of institution that brainwashes its children not to pursue an independent destiny, but simply to give up? Now, if that's the case, which students in school is it who don't have free will? Well, it's the children of the lower classes, those people who don't have proper jobs. It's the children of the kinds of people that the possibles are, those who are completely disadvantaged by society. And Ishiguro could well be pointing out here that schools don't do anything to improve the lives of those sorts of people. They end up following just the same tragic lives as their parents. They don't escape because they're not educated well enough. And if you look at the kind of curriculum that our students have in Hailsham, it's all about keeping them happy. It's not about academic success. And Ishiguro is suggesting that's what happens to the underclass in our schools. If you look at our bottom set kids, they're normally from poorer families, and they don't have aspiration. And moreover, the schools don't have aspiration for those kids. They don't make a difference to their lives. I think that's why Ishiguro has set so much of the story in a school. He's making a point about schools in our society. So again, the clones are just there to symbolize what happens in real life. Myself, for all the driving I do, I've never tried to find it. I'm not really interested in seeing it, whatever way it is now. Mind you, though I say I never go looking for Hailsham, what I find is that sometimes when I'm driving around, I suddenly think I've spotted some bit of it. I see a sports pavilion in the distance, and I'm sure it's ours, or a row of poplars in the horizon next to a big woolly oak, and I'm convinced for a second I'm going up the south playing field from the other side. Once on a grey morning, on a long stretch of road in Gloucestershire, I passed a broken down car in a lay-by, and I was sure the girl standing in front of it, gazing emptily out towards the oncoming vehicles, was Susanna C. So, even in this description, everything about Hailsham is reminiscent of death. So we have the grey morning, a long stretch of road, which is, leading towards what? Symbolic again of death. I passed a broken down car, and that again is a symbol of their ruined lives. In a lay-by, symbolic of how their lives are like this. They're not going anywhere. They're just waiting to die. And although she's looking at the traffic, the description suggests almost as though she's going to walk out in front of it. I'm sure the girl standing in front of it, gazing emptily out towards the oncoming vehicles, was Susanna C. And it's not literally that she's going to commit suicide by walking in front of it, although that is an allusion to it in her empty stare. But as I say, I don't go searching for it, and anyway, by the end of the year, I won't be driving around like this anymore. So the chances are I won't ever come across it now, and on reflection, I'm glad that's the way it'll be. It's like with my memories of Tommy and Ruth. Once I'm able to have a quieter life, in whichever centre they send me to, I'll have Hailsham with me, safely in my head, and that'll be something no one can take away. And that's exactly what happens with books. We create a universe that lives inside our head, and it stays with us forever. No one can take it away. And this is going to offer Kathy a lot of comfort when she gives up her life, whereas Tommy gives up his life just grateful to get rid of it. It's not that way for Kathy. She's giving up this kind of struggle to keep going, but she's replacing it with something else that's equally valuable. The only indulgent thing I did just once was a couple of weeks after I heard Tommy had completed, when I drove up to Norfolk, even though I had no real need to. So notice she just heard that Tommy had completed. He hasn't left her a letter or anything. Again, proof that actually their relationship was not based on love. I drove up to Norfolk even though I had no real need to. I wasn't after anything in particular, and I didn't go up as far as the coast. Maybe I just felt like looking at all those flat fields of nothing and the huge grey skies. So this again is an image of death, isn't it? It's pathetic fallacy, if you like. And she's looking at this image of nature and thinking, this is an image of my death. And you could even look at Norfolk to mean that, nor meaning no or not even, and folk meaning people. And that's like the clones. They're not even people. And that's why symbolically they imagine that this is where they might find their possibles, or at least Ruth's possible. And it's why they might find their lost things there, because it's the place for the non-people, the people who aren't real people, the clones. Maybe I just felt like looking at those flat fields of nothing and the huge grey skies. At one stage I found myself on a road I'd never been on, and for about half an hour I didn't know where I was, and I didn't care. I went past field after flat, featureless field, with virtually no change except when occasionally a flock of birds, hearing my engine, flew up out of the furrows. And you can't help notice the alliteration of all the F's here and the alliteration of all the F's here. And this is called a fricative, and it's no coincidence that when the mouth forms the F sound, you bare your teeth, and it's a primal sort of expression of anger. You imagine a dog or a chimpanzee, as soon as they bare their teeth, it shows you instantly that they're putting up a fight. And this is quite ironic here, because Kathy isn't putting up a fight, is she? Symbolically here, I didn't care. She's giving up on life. But at the same time, her description, as she writes it down, shows how she's still raging against the injustice of her condition, the injustice of dying. And that is conveyed through the alliteration of this fricative F, where to read it out loud, try it for yourself, forces you to bare your teeth. It's an angry gesture. And the irony, perhaps, is that Kathy doesn't realize how angry she actually is. I found I was standing before acres of ploughed earth. There was a fence keeping me from stepping into the field, with 2 lines of barbed wire, and I could see how this fence and the cluster of 3 or 4 trees above me were the only things breaking the wind for miles. All along the fence, especially along the lower line of wire, all sorts of rubbish had caught and tangled. So again, this is a metaphor for their lives, isn't it? So their lives have the illusion of free will. They can see into the field, as it were, but they can't get to what they actually want because of this metaphorical barbed wire that holds them back. And their lives are like the rubbish that's gathered there. Now, the question to ask is, Kathy is using this symbolism. Is she aware of what it means, or is she only describing what she sees? Clearly, Ishiguro is using it symbolically, but is Kathy? Is she entering a kind of conscious state where she realizes how pointless their lives have been? It was like the debris you get on a seashore. The wind must have carried some of it for miles and miles before finally coming up against these trees and these 2 lines of wire. Up in the branches of the trees, too, I could see flapping about torn plastic sheeting and bits of old carrier bags. And that was the only time, as I stood there, looking at that strange rubbish, feeling the wind coming across those empty fields, that I started to imagine just a little fantasy thing, just because this was Norfolk after all, and it was only a couple of weeks since I'd lost him. I was thinking about the rubbish, the flapping plastic in the branches, the shoreline of odd stuff caught along the fencing, and I half closed my eyes and imagined this was the spot where everything I'd ever lost since my childhood had washed up, and I was now standing here in front of it. If I waited long enough, a tiny figure would appear on the horizon across the field, gradually get larger until I'd see it was Tommy, and he'd wave, maybe even call. So this is quite this is the anguish that I was talking about in that review, isn't it? We've got this desperation to recover the things that she's loved, but they're symbolically just rubbish. Tommy, who she feels she has loved, doesn't respond, even in her fantasy, as a lover. He'd only wave. He might call, but he might not. So here, her death perhaps is coming about because she realizes that her life doesn't have the meaning she thinks it does. She's placed such a great store on this relationship with Tommy, but at the end, once he's died, she realizes that actually the relationship wasn't that much. It certainly wasn't one of lovers. And she can't spell that out to herself. She's trying to hide it, but her imagination is still bringing it back to her. Softly and gently. If we look at the repetition of sounds here, it's moved away from the F's to the S's. So we've got quite a bit of sibilance going on here, as though life itself is whispering to her and telling her about her mistake. And then we're looking at these final sentences here. Will she realize the true relationship she had with Tommy? The fantasy never got beyond that. I didn't let it. Though the tears rolled down my face, I wasn't sobbing or out of control. I just waited a bit and turned back to the car to drive off to whatever it was I was supposed to be. So that final sentence is one that you will always be able to write about, no matter what the essay, and it's one that you should remember so that you can always quote it. There is a sense of longing here, isn't it? That she's going to be whatever she was supposed to be. But there's also a sense of hopelessness, as though whatever it was is untraceable. She can never actually work out what the point of life is. And then if we go further, she's not going to be a person, she's going to be an it. And that reminds us, of course, that she's just a commodity. She's just a series of organs kept in one body that will be harvested as and when society needs it. So you can decide here whether this is a tragic ending because there is no meaning to her life, or whether it's an optimistic ending because as she finishes the book, she imagines that actually she will find out what life has been for and what she's supposed to be. And if we step outside it and think of it as a construct here, Ishiguro could be suggesting that once she's finished, she's put that full stop there, she is a fully fledged writer. And that's what she's supposed to be. And of course, her writing will live on after her. And perhaps this is Ishiguro's way of saying why he writes. It's a way of taking that piece of life and preserving it, so that his name will live on once he's dead, just as Kathy's will in this world once she's finished her book. So if you've got this far in the video, well done. That's amazing. It's one I've made for my class for a lesson that I'm not going to be in. So I hope you found it useful, and I hope that's made the book a little bit more interesting for you by thinking a little more deeply about it. Probably not many of you are studying this book, to be fair, so double congratulations if you got to the end of it.